All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I want to thank you all for braving our wonderful winter weather. Decided to make a return.
Especially the wind.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, the wind was.
It knew we were having an event, so it said, let's make it horrible.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here.
So I thank you all for coming to the next edition of our guest speaker series. This is a series that we try to do at least 2 speakers every month. Sometimes we do more. For instance, this month we have 3, so it's a busy time. But we're very happy to have Dr. Webster Bunch here to talk about her new book, The Morgan Affair, which is probably Genesee County's greatest question mark, what happened to William Morgan. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And since Ann sent me a very nice little bio, I'm going to read it. Because amazing or not, most speakers don't send me a bio to read. So if somebody does, I try to take the time. Yes, and she delivers. So Dr. Bunch is a forensic anthropologist who has dedicated her career to missing persons searches and methods. Graduate school work was an Andean zoo archaeologist, and then she began working for the U.S. Army Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii, which duties were to search for, recover, and identify missing in action personnel.
Thank you. Thank you.
So after that, she returned home to New York here, and now works on medical legal cases and searching for missing persons, recovering skeletal remains, and assisting in identification of unidentified human remains. So she decided to go way back 200 years for a really cold case, William Morgan. So, Dr. Bunch.
Make sure my mic is working. Is this working?
Can hear you.
Okay.
Well,
Let me
it's
see.
not on.
Okay, make sure my tech is on.
Nope, it's not on yet.
Ah, I see a light.
There we
Is it
go.
on now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Technology is not my forte. Looking for people is my forte. So thank you for the introduction, Ryan. Thank you for coming out tonight. I was going to say the same thing. You know, the weather isn't always cooperative. We know it's March and like a lion, not like a lamb. So I guess we're in the lion phase still. So everything that he said is true, and I have been working on missing persons cases since the 1990s when I did work for the Army doing that. I continue to do that with medical examiners. I consult in Onondaga County, I consult in Monroe County. At times they ask me to come out and look for individuals that might be buried, but never an individual that's been missing as long as William Morgan. So I consider this a missing persons case, and that's how I'm going to approach it. See if my technology is working here. So what I wanted to do was take a modern investigative approach and say, today, if we know what we know today, going back to 1826 or a little later, what can we learn? And maybe can we ever resolve this case? I don't want to use the historical no-no of presentism. So what I'm not going to do is say, oh, you know, they should have, could have, would have done this back then. No judgment. They did what they did at the time. They did the best they could at the time. Investigatively. But knowing what we know now, 200 years later, almost, we're getting to the anniversary of this disappearance. You know, what can we learn today about this case? So this is one of the oldest cases in the state of New York, maybe the oldest. I'm taking a retrospective approach, using modern day thoughts and data as best I can to try to get to the bottom of what occurred to William Morgan. And can we get a better understanding of what occurred in the past, taking this sort of modern day approach? So just consider today what happens with a missing person. It's filed, a report is filed, someone goes to the authorities. Okay? If it's a child, the investigation immediately begins. I don't know about you, but today my phone started exploding about 10:15.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, mine
New
too.
York State Police, right? Amber Alert practice trial run. I was shocked. It was pretty bad. But this is that would happen if we knew that there's a child missing, because a child cannot typically go on their own means and doesn't really want to leave, and they don't have the means to do so. So that means somebody else might have been in the agency of getting them to be gone, right? So there is urgency. There's a rule of 72 hours are absolutely critical. So there is a real quick movement when it is a child. We start to get into the teen years and later, it's a different approach. If it's an adult, then we're going to take maybe a little bit more of a delayed approach in getting your personnel out there searching. And there may be more of a vetting of the information and the person to see, maybe they want to go, maybe they want to disappear, maybe they, this is something they can do on their own, okay? Did they ever do this before? We're going to gather information. That really can frustrate family members that are anxious, but the police might take a little bit more time looking into it. Not forever, but they want to vet the situation. So, let's take, where's William Morgan in his life at 1826? A middle-aged adult. I say middle-aged because as I get older, 50 seems pretty young. So I'm not going to say a senior. I'm not going to say a senior or anything like that. I'm saying middle-aged, okay? I'm going to stick with that. So he was a middle-aged adult. I don't know what he was considered at the time, at age 26, maybe a little older, given the life expectancy. I use presentism only for that moment, okay? I think that the investigators today, looking back, would want to vet more information. Say, where was he at? What was going on in his life? What was the social context, the biopsychosocial context at the time? So they'd wait before they immediately rushed out to search for him in September 1826. Here's a depiction of William Morgan you're probably familiar with. This is the most common depiction of William Morgan, the gentleman, the scholar. Okay? And I believe in the museum there is a depiction like this of him. They're plentiful. When you think of William Morgan, if you Google an image, you're going to see this. Or you used ChatGPT, you may see this. He was born in 1774, 1775 in Virginia, Culpeper County, purportedly served in the War of 1812, and was called by the title frequently of captain. He was a stonemason by trade. He married a woman named Lucinda Pendleton, also from Virginia, in 1819. Moved to York, Canada in 1821 to try his hand at brewing. The fire destroyed his brewery, so they moved to Rochester. The couple moved to Rochester and then to Batavia in 1824. He had two children, Lucinda the younger, and Thomas Jefferson, who went by TJ, who was born in 1826. So both children were very young at the time of his disappearance. He joined the Royal Arch Masonic Lodge in Leroy after his arrival to Rochester. Okay, so this was what we know and what historical references tell us. When Batavia was proposing, the Freemasons in Batavia were proposing to begin a new lodge, he had his name on that petition to be, someone who was supporting that petition that would be going to the Grand Lodge in New York to be approved. However, the final petition that was submitted did not have his name on it. It came to his attention that his name was not on the final petition submitted to the Grand Lodge, and at that point, strife began between him and the others in the Freemason community. He then began to threaten to publish, quote unquote, the secrets of Freemasonry. He joined ranks with David Miller, who had a printing press, to do so, and a lot of you probably know the story, that there was a lot of strife between those that wanted to out the secrets, quote unquote, and then the Freemasons who did not want these things published.
Does anyone know why his name was not on the petition?
That is a great question. I've never seen it in a historical document as to why. Yeah.
He was never issued a petition when this new lodge was being formed. Because you have to ask, they don't give it to you. And It didn't exist.
So I don't know how he would have heard or known a rumor that his name was not on it, but this is supposedly the start of the factions that developed. As to why, there's no explanation, or how he heard that. Another depiction of William Morgan that comes from a book by Robert Morris, Dr. Robert Morris, who published in 1883, and I read his book extensively on this subject. I quote him heavily in my book. Different picture, you don't see it that much. Robert Morris states that Morgan and others, Morgan did not serve in the military. There's no record in the War Department of his service. Brown, Morris, and Knight all asked and requested for records, no such thing. So we might call it stolen valor today. I will not refer to him with that rank, and I never do in my book. He was not a Mason, so this is another statement, is that his initiatory degree has never been found. So he did not necessarily, in any record, have a degree that would have allowed him to be in the Lord Lodge. So did they do their due diligence to permit him into that lodge? That's a question mark. But there's no evidence of his first degree, second degree, third degree.
It sounds like he was a scoundrel and a rogue.
And you should have seen what Robert Morris took off for quotes about a boss crank and other types of words. So, yes, Morgan had a possible substance misuse and financial difficulties, led to a questionable reputation in the community. Is that why his name was taken off the petition? I don't know. I don't know. Attempts to assist, there were attempts to try to reestablish harmony between himself and the community and their Masonic Brotherhood. In fact, the attempts to establish harmony went all the way up to the state Masonic leadership. DeWitt Clinton, who was the Grand Master at the time and was a governor of New York and was a potential candidate for the United States president. So he was somebody who was very powerful, but also very thoughtful, and apparently wanted to kind of calm the waters here in September 1826 by saying, hey, we can help you. There's a detailed account provided by John Whitney, who was also a Mason, about these attempts to try to reestablish harmony with William Morgan. Whitney personally met with Morgan somewhere around here, I don't know, at a tavern or restaurant or what have you, and saw him quite distraught, quite anxious, feeling a lot of pressure to publish from one side, pressure not to from the other side. And Whitney goes on a great deal because apparently DeWitt Clinton was involved in trying to say, let's get this thing settled, let's try to help him out, maybe get him a better situation somewhere else, but maybe help him get out of the situation. Okay? Just looking at that, and the situation in fall, or near fall, late summer of 1826, it seems like William Morgan might have had a reason to want to disappear. He may have wanted to get out of this situation here because of the pressures from both sides. Okay. Investigators love timelines, so I have a timeline to walk through. Okay, what happened to get to the point where we don't know where he is now? So he's deteriorating in 1826, September timeframe. Whitney witnesses this. He sits down with them, says, maybe we can help you. Do you need money? What do you need? Apparently, according to Whitney, Morgan even talked about self-harm. So he was very distraught and not looking good. Aligned with others in Batavia threatening to publish secrets, brought up charges. He was brought up on charges of larceny in Canandaigua. So apparently someone had offered, lent him a shirt and a cravat, and he had not returned it. And at that point they thought, well, that's theft then. And it technically is. I mean, if you're by the book in a criminal penal code, that technically can be charged. Now the person can give it back and then it's resolved, but apparently he didn't do that. So he is actually charged with larceny or theft and is brought to Canandaigua, where he reports in September 1826. He is held briefly there. and then taken to Canandaigua to Fort Niagara. The route is known. Different Freemasons along the road switched carriages, took him out, brought him into another carriage. There is a picture on the front of my book about him being kind of bodily shoved into a carriage. They made stops along the way. They know who drove where, all the way to Fort Niagara. He was held there. Before I get to where he was held in Fort Niagara, there's this moment where things start to get a little bit off script. So apparently, there's two sides to this. One is he was kidnapped and forced into the carriages and taken against his will. The other is that he kind of knew this was going to happen, and it was a way to get him out of here. And this is what Whitney was saying, is that there was an agreement that he was going to be removed, and that he was going to be taken to Canada, and then set up there with his wife and kids. Okay, so that was what was going on according to Morris, Whitney, etc. He gets to Fort Niagara, gets in a boat, goes almost all the way across. Some of the Freemasons go all the way across to talk to the Masons on the other side. They're not ready for him. That is what says logistically something. They're not ready to receive him yet. That's when they turn him around, go back to Fort Niagara, and he's held in the powder room at that fort for a few days. That's when things kind of, I think, go off in a direction that wasn't planned. He's in limbo now. And apparently drinking some alcohol, getting a little loud, getting a little frustrated. Okay, so there's stress then, and after the 21st, we don't know what happened. Okay, so this, I think, was not planned, and of course, now we have a big question mark. All right, so there are historical documents and court documents about what happened afterwards. There was an investigation because he disappeared. And there are charges filed on these four individuals. There are documents that come from Canandaigua where the trials were held, and they were found guilty of kidnapping and false imprisonment. That's it. And again, you think about it, well, if he wanted to go in the carriage, he might have wanted to go. That's not kidnapping, that's not false imprisonment. But the powder room in Fort Niagara, I think those charges could stick. Various stories about what occurred after this Niagara River turnaround. Numerous narratives emerge about his fate. We have two, it's kind of a bifurcate situation here. He died. And he was murdered post-imprisonment. So at some point on or about the 21st or after, he was taken from the powder room and murdered. The other one is he lived. So eventually, after the 21st or on the 21st, he was taken across the river and he got to Canada. And so the plan was then continued to get him there. His wife and kids would come later. Then the mystery continues because scouts that were reported to be sent out by the Freemasons saying, wait a minute, he's missing, there's continued strife because he's missing now. We need a record of him, or we need him to come back, or we need word that he's okay. So they sent scouts out to verify, is he okay over there in Canada? They said that he disappeared. So he took off, didn't wait for his wife, didn't wait for his kids, and just disappeared. More on that in a minute. Now, there's lots of stories about what happened once he got to Canada. Besides taking off, he remained there. That's one narrative. He got on a ship to Boston. Where did he go once he got to Boston? He went to Turkey, which is Smyrna. Izmir now, modern day Izmir, was Smyrna back then. He stayed in Boston. Went to Kentucky. Ended up staying in Albany. All kinds of suggestions about what happened. Or he ended up in Caribbean islands. The Cayman Islands, Honduras, Utila Island. Okay, so we're going to explore all those. And I might have to speed it up because there's so much to say about this case. I don't want to keep you up. I don't want you to keep you too late, but it can go on forever here. Okay, so option one, he's murdered. Let's just look at that. What do we know? Here's one thing we really do know. Body of his body was never found, which is why I feel like it is a cold case. It is a mystery. It is a missing person still until we have the body. We have one false positive in 1827. So I'll just explore that because I am a forensic anthropologist, and this is where I got really interested, is these coroner's inquests. So I'll get back to them in a second. They did search. They didn't just say, oh, he's missing. They did do their due diligence. So 1826, in the fall, in the winter, and the next spring, the Niagara River was dragged. The shores were searched, Lake Ontario, the Niagara River, Lake Erie shores. Rumors floated and multiplied. And if you see rivers being dragged, rumors are gonna flow, right? People searching, so there's all kinds of stories out there. A sturgeon ate his boot. A tree was uprooted and he was put under it and the tree was put back down. I mean, all kinds of things were developing. In 1827, in October, at Point Breeze in Carlton, Orleans County, my neck of the woods, this is modern day Point Breeze, a body was recovered. October 1827, very interesting reading about this discovery by Robert Morris and others. A body was washed up on Lake Ontario rocks. Coroner's inquest number 1. A coroner's inquest has the coroner, which there are 3 in every county, which you probably well know. And then the coroner is bound to assemble a jury to be there to basically assist with this investigation that happens pretty much on the spot or soon after discovery of a deceased individual. The persons that are in the jury, I think there has to be 12, and they have to be from the jurisdiction where the body was found. Okay. What did they find? Lots of descriptive. And apparently the body was found because vultures were hanging around. And so that attracted people to look and go, okay, this is why they're hanging around. Description, they did measurements. They did notice that this person did not have quote unquote double teeth. William Morgan was said to have quote unquote double teeth. Okay, I've talked to my forensic dentist friends. It is not a very common thing. Here's from a dental guidebook as to what that means. So you would see in a mouth of a person who had these double crowns naturally occurring. So they can come in a number of ways. Fusion, gemination, or concrescence. Concrescence means you literally see double teeth, 2 teeth per one. Gemination and fusion basically are just split crowns. But there is a congenital deformation. You can live with it, there's no clinical problem, it's just a dental feature that happens very rarely, more in men. I think it's like 0.01% or something, so it's very infrequent. So to me, if you had a person with double teeth and they're missing and you find a body, that would be a major helpful feature to identify them dentally pretty quickly, okay? Because it's so rare, so rare. Cause of death found drowned. So the cause of death, technically, and the media get this mixed up all the time, is the medical reason for the death. So it's usually, it would be something like drowning, or asphyxia, or heart attack, some medical explanation. That's the cause of death. Manner of death is not listed. So that's 1 of 5 choices: homicide, suicide, natural, accidental, or unknown. It's the death certificate checkbox that you have to, the official, the coroner has to check. In that case, they didn't. They couldn't tell at this point. No identification made. However, there was talk afterwards, it doesn't look like William Morgan. So they must have known, the rumors were out, he's a missing person. Didn't look like him. That was the Orleans County Coroner Inquest assessment. They did publish a notice in, like an advertisement, I believe, in a periodical or newspaper to alert the public, hey, there's a missing person. Maybe we can alert the public. Somebody who has a missing relative, loved one, or friend might say, okay, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while. Maybe that is them. So this is what they did to get public awareness. We found a body, we don't know who it is. The body was interred near where it was recovered in Carlton, so this is just a logistical kind of interim state of affairs. Okay. Now we have a second coroner's inquest. So after a few days, people down in this county had read the notice and said, missing person? Maybe it's Morgan. So Thurlow, Weed, and others went to take a look, and the body was exhumed because there were questions. And before the second inquest took place, the body was held in an office in Carlton. and waited for 2 days. And there were basically, I think it was a Saturday, so they had to wait till a weekday to make it happen. They had to assemble a jury. I don't know if it was even a legal jury because the people that came were from this county and the jurisdiction's Orleans County. So I'm not sure that was a legal coroner's inquest, but nonetheless it happened. And there was a waiting period, is my point, before the actual inquest. So who's watching the watchman is a question, a legal question. The coroner at this point was Robert M. Brown. Carlton happened on October 15th, 1827. Participants included the person who initiated it, Thurlow Weed, I'll talk about him again. David Miller was there, who had the printing press ready to print anything available whenever it was ready. And Morgan's wife, Lucinda, she also attended. And you can imagine the trauma for a loved one to be there for this kind of thing. No measurements were taken in this inquest. It was, I would say, in my opinion, less scientific than the first. Interestingly, this person had ear hairs, whereas that wasn't noted in the first inquest. In fact, it wasn't really noted after the exhumation. There was less hair on the head and there was hair in the ears. The hair in the ears seemed to be deposited. Now, William Morgan was known to have visible hair in his ears, but this body apparently somehow got that at that time, and it was noted. Suffocation by drowning, so nothing new there, person drowned. No manner of death again provided, so we don't know homicide, suicide, accidental, natural. You're allowed to do no manner. It's called undetermined. To this day, that is a category, so that was probably what it was, undetermined. The visual identification, so the person was ID'd. It wasn't a positive scientific ID, though. It was an ID by, we call it visual identification. It is a method. It is not scientific. It is still taught today in death investigations, and people come in, close relatives, parents, siblings, friends, somebody who knows the person well. They will identify them by looking, identifying the face, possibly, if there hasn't been too much postmortem change, or tattoos, scars, birthmarks, something that they would know. That can happen. Now, Lucinda said, this is him. How did this happen? He didn't have double teeth. It was already said. She knew he had double teeth. She mentioned he had a surgery for a frostbite on his toe. That wasn't really even looked into. How? False positives do happen. They definitely happen. You can imagine the trauma. What people do is sometimes go, yep, that's him, and they get out. They don't want to be there. So it's a quick thing. You don't want to be there. At this point, the remains probably didn't look anything like a person, generally speaking. It certainly wouldn't have the face identifiable. So I believe she might have been traumatized, and she might have been in a hurry to get out. Also, there's pressure from the other officials there. Thurlow Weed, David Miller, other people are there, the coroner. There's a pressure to say something. Maybe it's something that you don't necessarily know, but you're conforming to the situation. Okay. This happens, for sure. The body was actually taken to Batavia with great ceremony and publicly displayed in a private yard, and I forget the name of the person's yard, and they said it was quite notable, not just by the sight, but by the smell, and it got everybody's attention. Okay, it got everybody's attention, and then was buried over in Harvester Street in Old Cemetery. Just to back up Thurlow Weed, just a little bit of information. He got the second inquest started. He was a New York State Assemblyman. He was the editor of the Rochester Telegraph, so he was a media person, newspaper person, Republican Party politically. He did form the coroner's inquest. He started the first third political party, always sounds weird, first third party in the United States. The Anti-Masonic Party started by Thurlow Weed. And he began a newspaper called the Anti-Masonic Inquirer after all this. Okay, he comes back. We have another coroner's inquest. Jonathan Hurlbut, right here in Genesee County, I would say is the most scientific inquest. Okay? Three Corners, Hurlburt oversaw this one. The county clerk here was nice enough to give me the entire transcript from that, so I actually have a copy of it. Very well documented. October 29th, 1827. So just, all in the month of October, this is happening. A person from Canada, Sarah Monroe, had been reading also that advertisement about a body being found and had realized it might be her husband Timothy. So she showed up with her son David and John Cross, a family friend, and gave very specific, detailed description of clothing that he might have been wearing, to the point where she was talking about reparations she'd made, repairs and as a seamstress, fixing things, and papers that he might have had on his persons, some Christian literature. They described it to the point where these people know a lot that they haven't even seen the body or the personal effects. He was identified as Timothy Monroe, but not after a scientific inquiry with a coroner's inquest again. Measurements were taken. It was the most detailed inquest. They looked at the surgical possible marks where Morgan had surgery on the big toe, and they didn't see any. They looked for the double teeth to try to exclude Morgan. They measured. They also said, they did an assessment about what we call post-mortem interval, and the coroner said, I would expect to see more deterioration of a person that had been gone since 1826, a year. So they some logic and reason kicked in here to say he'd be much more reduced in his appearance. Drowning was the cause of death. Actually, the manner of death finally addressed, accidental, and eventually the remains were exhumed and taken by the Monroe family for the proper burial in Canada. So that means there's no body in the old cemetery. Weed was actually confronted with this after, and someone stated that he said, well, the body was a good enough Morgan at the time. Okay. He denied that later. He denied it to his death, but he was quoted as saying it was good enough Morgan because politically it worked quite well for him. Okay, so no physical evidence. All we have as far as evidence is confessions. And confessions and statements are actually evidence. They're just non-physical evidence. Okay, so there was never any physical evidence. 6 individuals came forward over time to confess. I'll just put them out here. Thomas Hamilton, Edward Hopkins, Edward Giddens, R.H. Hill, Mr. Mann implicated Richard Howard as well, so you might consider that another person. Henry Millance made a deathbed confession, supposedly, published in 1848 and published again in 1869. Okay. Now, these were vetted, official statements were taken. One thing they like to do when statements are made is triangulate, or at least try to get some other corroborating statements, right? In this case, every single one of these cases, none produced any leads or additional corroborating evidence that could be followed up on, so they were all dropped. I should say here. So Hamilton and Mann actually presented to be rather mentally unstable, either during the interview or right after. Mann deteriorated quickly afterwards. So there are questions, and I don't know if I have it here. The question is, why do people confess to a crime they didn't commit? There's a lot of research on this. Forced confessions are well researched. Those are ones that are under duress, trauma, physical abuse, mental and emotional abuse, and people just can't take it anymore, and they will say, I did it, because they just want to get out of the situation. Those have been well researched. But voluntary false confessions is a different story. They have been researched. So why do people voluntarily admit to doing a crime? 3 things come to mind, and the research shows. One is what I said about Hamilton and Mann. Some kind of mental illness, such as Munchausen's disease, also maybe histrionic personality disorder. So there are some personality disorders or mental statuses that might make somebody do this. I don't know if you saw it, but today somebody mentioned that her boyfriend had killed John Benet Ramsey. John Benet Ramsey is a case where someone did voluntarily come forward and say, I killed her. That might be some kind of seeking attention, okay, some kind of mental illness. The other is maybe they feel generalized guilt about something, and this admission expiates or makes that guilt go away because I admitted to something else. So that's the second one that isn't totally mutually exclusive with the mental illness component. The third one, which I wouldn't have come up with, but without doing some research on this, and I cite the authors, these criminologists and sociologists and psychologists that study this, is that people might confess to something they didn't do by trying to gain something with a group, another group. So they know gang members do this. Juveniles, sometimes bettering your circumstances, physically or not physically. So, physically you might say trying to plea bargain, trying to reduce your sentence, something like that might make somebody do this. But also just try to increase your standing or your reputation with a certain group. So I would say Hawkins, Giddens, Hill might have all been in that category where they were sort of seeking acceptance or reputation with the anti-Masons. Okay, so by talking against them or elaborating, that might have kind of built their reputation with that group. Okay. The deathbed confession, I have a little bit more to add to. Actually, the most detailed account of Morgan's disappearance was provided by John Whitney because he talks about things that happened before, during, and after. And he was one who was interviewed by Robert Morris in great detail, but he was also, he discussed this with Thurlow Weed, and Thurlow Weed actually fingered him and said he confessed. So in my book, I talk about him as a confessor, and he said, I didn't confess anything. So he basically knew a lot about what led up to the disappearance and what was done afterwards to try to find Morgan. A deathbed confession, just to talk about Valance for a minute. You might think, oh, that person has nothing to lose. I mean, they're going to kind of tell everything at that point, aren't they? Those are the best kind of statements because they don't owe anybody anything. They're exiting this life. This is their true honesty. No. Courts do not like deathbed confessions. They don't like them because you cannot cross-examine the individual. They're gone. And we like to cross-examine in this country. That's kind of the heart of an investigation or a trial, is asking, the other side gets a chance to ask questions. You can't ask questions of somebody who confesses under deathbed. In the case of Valance, there is no record of him or his doctor, John Emery, there's a book, who took down this confession, supposedly. There's no record of them out in Racine County, Wisconsin. I did talk to the county clerk out there. I did do research on Racine County census records at the time, 1848, 1840, before and after. There's no record of these people out there. That doesn't mean they weren't there. Believe me, this was the frontier, right? I know records probably weren't well kept. It doesn't mean they weren't there. But I did look into it, and I cannot find a record of them. John Emery, you'd think a doctor would have a record somewhere. Couldn't find it. There's an Emory in Ohio, but not up here. So, and the time frame for that Emory in Ohio is not consistent. So I'm a little bothered by this. There's a Valance family in Roy, and there's actually a Valance Road as I'm driving down one day. I'm like, oh, wow. So there are Valances in Leroy, and they've been there since the 1820s, and they're buried in Mumford Rural Cemetery. So there's a family of Valance here. Interestingly, the Batavia local newspaper discussed a letter found when a woman named Latrice LaDuke came up to go through her dad's belongings and found a photocopy of a letter that was her grandfather's, Mark Johnson's, that had the first page, the intro to this confession, on it with slightly different wording. I asked for more. I'm like, do you have more than the first page? No, they don't have more. So the county clerk was very responsive, but did not have more than that page. It was dated to the 1840s to 1850s. It's a copy. It had a congressional stamp on it, but it's the first page of this was confession with slightly different wording. Now, I don't know what drafts of a deathbed confession. That bothered me as well. It raised questions about the authenticity of the deathbed confession that was published by Emery and then republished again in 1869. Yeah, come back to that. Now, the publication by Emery in 1848, I did find out that Thurlow Weed was on the campaign of a presidential candidate named Cass, who ran against Zachary Taylor. So I don't know if there's any tie with Weed, again, trying to resurrect the story in 1848. But that was an interesting connection, possibly, with Weed and his love of kind of stirring the pot. Okay, so we only have those confessions, and none of them have come out with verification. What if we explore what happened if Morgan lived? According to John Whitney, who gave quite a lot of detail, 2 indigenous Americans, Native Americans, were sent by Freemasons to try to find him after he disappeared, because things were getting a little bit worse in Batavia and in this area after he disappeared. They returned with the same story, that he had basically just disappeared into Canada after he was dropped off. They said he departed, he was taken across the Niagara River and rode to Point Hope, Canada. This is what the scouts said. Both of them said the same thing. He rode to Point Hope, got on a ship, and no longer seen. That's the scout story. That's what Whitney reported. Okay. Where did the ship go? I mentioned possible places. There were sightings. Sightings, now they pop up all over. He was seen in Boston, okay? Reports of Morgan being sighted on the street. He ran away when somebody, he thought somebody was following him. I have checked census data, and I am aware, very aware, that records aren't everything. But I was on my sabbatical, I had a lot of time. I looked into census and grave data in the area around the time that he would have been there after 1826, and does not support that he was there. Now, he could have changed his name, of course, and if that happens, I'm not going to know who I'm searching for, right? But there is nobody named William Morgan that would fit his situation, his age, his status. In the Albany area, there were rumors that he was living there, not in great conditions, being held by Weed and maybe other anti-Masons, maybe to be used at a later date. I don't know why, but he also supposedly went by a different name, Wanamaker. So I looked under Morgan, I looked under every way you could spell the name Wanamaker, and the census data, again, did not support, and the grave data does not support. And again, I realize it's not exhaustive, but I had checked to see, is there any support of this? It's a possibility. Smyrna, Turkey. 2 American sailors reported seeing Morgan, who had changed his name to Mustafa. Now, right next to me in Rockport, one of my colleagues in the Criminal Justice Department is from Turkey. So I got him going on this for a little bit, and he was like, there's a lot of Mustafas in Turkey. I'm like, I know. I know. So yeah, I got it from the Turkish person himself. He supposedly kind of went native, changed his religion to Islam, wore native dress, but they reported that they did run into this guy who they thought was Morgan. Grave data, ship manifest data available online. Again, you can be just so thorough with this, but searching for the local cemeteries, I didn't find William Morgan, I didn't find a Mustafa Morgan, I didn't find anything that would support this. Also, ship manifest data would be a good way to look. But again, records aren't everything. As much as I could search, I didn't find any links or connections. Okay, so fast forward to 1880. Morgan makes a reappearance. So we're almost on a 20-year cycle. It's interesting. 1826, he's gone, and then 1848, there's a deathbed confession. Then in 1869, this is republished. Now in 1880, you can't read it completely, but the quarry was excavated in June 1881. Skeletal remains were found, along with a silver ring monogram WM, and a small tin box containing a burnt document. Dr. Phillips, who I did find record of, this doctor did exist in the area. He had a microscope, so he was able to take things, especially the papers. I thought that was interesting. It's like the skeletons and all the personal effects are the big focus. I would do it the other way, but anyway. Under his microscope, he saw words he could make out, and this is in the newspaper: Mason, liar, kill, prison, and Henry Brown. These items are nowhere to be found today. So I went to the Pembroke Museum, I went to the little museum, the clerk, nothing. There's news media about it, so the Batavia Daily News reports on this in 1881, and the New York Times picked it up the next day. The implication was that Morgan was found at last. Okay.
Anybody check the teeth on that skeleton?
I wanted to see that skeleton so badly, right? So badly. Long story short, there's nothing. No remains, no personal effects, no papers, no rings, no nothing. Brown, actually, Henry Brown was a Batavia attorney. He wrote a book on this incident in 1827. So investigators like statements that are made right away. Those are the best statements. So if you're going to interview someone, you want to get to them quickly because they don't have time to think about it, lose their memory, anything. So it's called res geste statements. 1827 happened right after 1826. So Henry Brown's book to me was very valuable. He was a Mason. He was implicated though. When you see his names there under the microscope, and it was brought up in the New York Times that his name was there. The story was resurrected and trumpeted. Why? I don't know. Maybe there was discontent about presidency. Garfield was a Mason. He was inaugurated in March 1881. There was a contentious election. He was a dark horse. Who knows? I should say, too, there were methods around at this time, scientific methods, to identify a person or at least learn about a skeleton. So this is my bailiwick, this is my thing. They knew at the time that you could look at the skeleton, measure, and establish things like the sex, the height, the age at death. Those kind of things were doable, and again, like you said, if you had the teeth, hello, you could still do a forensic identification with the teeth, looking at the restorations or just the teeth themselves. Double teeth could certainly tell you. There were ways that somebody could have worked on the skeleton to try to establish a connection with Morgan or someone else. Where's the coroner's inquest?
Where did the skeleton go?
I wish I knew. But there was a quarry, so at least we've got something here. Driving around, so this was the Tesno property in Pembroke where this quarry was. Near Tesno Road, there is a feature on Google Maps that looks like a quarry, 200 meters north of Tesno Road in Pembroke. And I did look at old property designations, and that was on the Tesno property, right in the corner, the northwest corner of Pembroke. There's no sign of skeletal remains, there's no artifacts, there's no personal effects, there's no marker here that this place resolved the mystery. Where's the marker? Why did it just fade away? Why did it fade away? Okay, but there was a quarry. I'm sad that there was no skeletal remains, because I would like to take a look, and I have dentists that would too. So the Batavia Monument in the old cemetery was erected in September 13th, 1882. 13th was the day that Morgan disappeared in 1826. Funds were raised by the National Christian Association of Chicago. The NCA opposed secret societies. They were very, very outright about this, and they opposed Freemasonry because they saw it as a secret society. Charles Finney, that's a typo, it should be Finney, was an NCA member, president of Oberlin College. He republished this confession in 1869. The anti-Masonic Party was revived in 1872. It didn't get as much traction as it did in the 1830s, but it was revived. Garfield was elected. I think there was a little bit of disgruntlement about that from some corners. John Blanchard, the NCA leader, was an anti-Masonic Party member. That party shifted over to be the Prohibition Party later. He actually ran for president of the United States in 1884, so soon after this monument was resurrected, a leader of the group that put it up was intended to run for president and did. Okay. One thing we didn't explore is where did Morgan go? Did he possibly go to the Caribbean? So did that ship that left for Boston continue on? There is some rumor about that. There's a book published about this. The Cayman Islands, Little Cayman Island, ultimately Utah, Honduras is where the rumor is that he ended up. Morris did not explore this one. He did not mention this in his book. Other later authors did. So there is online information, ancestry, genealogical information to indicate a possible link. There's a statement that William Morgan arrived at around the right time, and that a man named Ward Grantham Morgan was born in 1832. Here's his picture. He has family members that live to this day in Arizona and in San Antonio, Texas, and other areas, and still down in Utah, Honduras. Recent relatives, they have a family narrative, and I found it online. Supposedly Morgan got there. This is William Morgan. He married Catherine Page, and that's the parents of Ward Morgan, who you see here. And they have a family narrative about him. So the family learned this from their relatives down in Honduras. This is about William Morgan. Mr. Morgan was married in the United States. He must have been a fisherman or some other trade. A friend of his told him that as he left shore, a man was sleeping with his wife. That night he said goodbye as usual, and when he thought she was asleep, he went home and found her in bed with said man. He told the man to leave, then shot his wife and left for the sea. He landed in Utah Island. After a short while he married, that would be Catherine Page, the mother of Ward Grantham Morgan. He told his wife what he'd done. It left him a nervous wreck. Whenever a boat was seen coming to the harbors, he would go to the bush and hide. His wife knew his hiding place and would take him food. He stayed until the boat left and was out of sight. So that's the family story about William Morgan. Why was he hiding? He made up a story, possibly, if this is the William Morgan. But he would disappear whenever ships arrived. And that was a family narrative. So, how can we possibly get to the bottom of this? I'm starting to think about modern methods to solve it. We've got a relative. We've got lots of relatives from this particular son and other family members descended from him. We call this the Caribbean line or lineage. If you explore Y chromosome DNA, which follows the male line, you could find a direct connection between Ward Grantham Morgan's lineage and T.J. Morgan's lineage, the son from Batavia. Okay? They would both have paternal Y chromosome DNA that would be the same. And you could say paternity. It's like doing a paternity test. The Batavia relative DNA, TJ would be great because that's Y chromosome. Women don't carry the Y chromosome. That would be a great way to link those two lineages to say Morgan lived on, because look, Ward Grantham has that same DNA. You could use daughter Lucinda's DNA too to compare to Ward Grantham Morgan's DNA. It would be a little bit of a different process, but that can be done. Okay, they can do that. If there's consistency between the Caribbean lineage and the Batavia lineage, then you would be able to say, without a doubt, that William Morgan lived on and died, relatively aged man, in the Honduras.
What happened to the Batavia Morgan offspring?
Yeah, they left and went west, and TJ, I did follow up on TJ, he had a son, and I have done some lineage work on him. So he had a son named William. And then after that, it fades out, but I feel like genealogists, if they were set on this, could do a great job and track these people down. Okay, so TJ and Lucinda had families. Yeah. Is there an end in sight? The story has apparently been dusted off for political use. It's almost like a generational thing. Every 20 years, good enough Morgan to start, and then a Pembroke skeleton again came for a little while, and then everything's gone. All the evidence. Why? With some additional outreach, this missing person case could be resolved. It could verify that Morgan had lived on if we can find a connection between the Caribbean lineage and the Batavia lineage. Now, news alert, news alert, news alert. There is something even better out there called FIG. forensic investigative genetic genealogy. I just got back from Baltimore where there were forensic meetings. That's all they talked about was fig, and artificial intelligence was the other side. But with FIG, what they do is they get on Ancestry.com, 23andMe, and all these other genealogy websites. If you've ever done that, all you have to do is X a box, and what we've done is say, you can put my sequence out in public. Therefore, it's public. And they have solved cases this way. So what I want to do, and I actually started yesterday, I reached out to Bodhi Technology, who is the leader in this, to see if they could help me work on this case. Because you don't have to get a buccal swab, you don't need a blood draw, you don't need remains. You just need to follow Ward Grantham Morgan's lineage and TJ's or Lucinda's, and they can tell us that there's a common parent. Okay? So hopefully Bodhi will get back to me. I'm very excited about that. If you've seen the movie called Breakthrough, it's a Swedish movie about using this technology. They broke a case called the Golden State Killer case using this technology. Okay, so to be continued. Okay, the mystery's not over. We've got maybe going to Honduras to do some work. We got possibly the DNA lab and comparing remains or mitochondrial or Y chromosome DNA, or maybe just the computer and Bodhi Technology can follow these lines and bring it all together. Thank you for your attention. Questions?
Of course, if they can't find TJ and offspring,
Right.
then it's a dead end.
Not with the FIG, because the FIG used something called SNPs, SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism. Those run in families. They are basically single little alleles that change and can be matched. So we don't need TJ if we're doing the FIG.
But only if isn't there something contributed to somebody to put it in the database?
Nope. Well, yes. So family members have to do a swab. They send it off to 23andMe, Ancestry.com. So
if none of them have ever done
if
that,
none of
then it is a dead end.
we have to hope. We have to hope that Lucinda's family or Ward Grantham's family, somebody did do this. And the funny thing is, you don't have to have them. You just have to have proximate relatives. So you can go out to siblings, first cousins and second cousins, and you're still going to be able to make your case.
So TJ's lineal descendants would be useful
Absolutely.
then.
Absolutely. Yeah, any proximate relatives they can use to make a case. And what they do is they give you likelihood ratios that it is a relative. So that's a Bayesian statistic that'll tell you it's this likely that it was this person. So it's very much grounded in science when they can do these comparisons. Yeah.
I just had something to contribute to that.
Yes.
Because, well, here we're kind of a Morgan Mecca for people. And we've actually met descendants, or at least they say they're descendants.
Right.
I met people that claim to be descended from Lucinda, the daughter.
Ah.
And they lived in Tennessee, which,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm sure Pat can also contribute to that.
I have met, when I was here, I met Honduran Morgans.
Yes.
But I think they lived in Louisiana or Texas.
Texas.
One of them was an attorney. I remember
Yeah.
there was an attorney. And the kid was maybe 15 or 16. And guess what he had? Double teeth.
You're kidding.
Did you not? So he claims.
Oh.
And if you had to volunteer to search the guest book, you could probably find the name of the guest book.
Wow.
I've got the guest book.
I have a challenge for all of you. That is to acquire some DNA gathering kits, have them on hand. Brian, the next time someone comes in, you ask them very politely and give them a $10 bill. If they'll give
I won't
us
even be
one.
polite about it.
I have an extra kit.
See, there we go, we'll make it happen. So if somebody else wanders in claiming that, we will be like, we're taking DNA today, so.
I have an extra kit.
Yeah, so there are supposedly descendants out there, and they've come back to the scene of the crime, so.
Sure.
I'll put it in.
Gosh.
Excellent. Okay.
So this is it.
Any other questions?
Close.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think of the TV series Bones?
Oh, it's great. It is written by a forensic anthropologist, Kathy Wright. And so she is a board certified practicing forensic anthropologist. So everything she says is legitimate as far as what they do there, as far as the science goes. I think the drama, solving things in an hour, or that kind of thing.
Making it palatable for the public, yeah.
Right, trying to attract the audience and keep their attention. But it is a very good show. Yeah, I like it.
What was the name, did you say?
Bones, the Bones show.
Who did they find in the genealogy that put them?
Nothing yet. I mean, nothing yet. That's what they have to do. So if they're going to do this, you would have to say, normally they're looking for a relative, or they have in criminal work, what they have to sequence and they don't know who it is. So they get on these sites and try to match it up.
I'm a genealogist, so.
Okay, cool.
So we're just wondering.
We don't have,
There's no tree.
there's nothing yet, no, because we basically, you have to pay for the work. And so that's something where in order to get a genealogist to work on this.
Yeah, I've got the world on Ancestry, but.
Yeah, so basically they are comparing the sequence that was publicly contributed to the other side. I don't know if they've ever done this with body technology. A lot of times they're trying to see if it's close to a criminal sequence. Yeah, but basically the next thing I would like to do genealogically is try to trace down TJ's relatives. I came to a dead end. Yeah, so he's got a son, and beyond that, I don't know how long his son lived.
You want to speak about the book that's down in Utila?
Yeah, I mean, that is where I saw the relative. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and it's cited in my book. So that is a very good source where Ward Grantham Morgan's picture is shown. So this picture of Ward Grantham,
I was down in Utila for 3 months last year.
right, and there's a Morgan family home there, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so this
As far as they're
picture,
concerned, it's definite, he's definitely the guy.
so they,
Or no, yeah.
in Utila, they believe that the William Morgan, From here? okay,
He's got a full face like the one from there.
He starts out saying this is a true story.
yeah, yeah. So this one to me, Whitney's statements up until his disappearance, getting on a ship to Boston, seemed like the most detailed. After that, this was the one that I saw, this story was the one that gave the most information and had more defined and people talking about. Here's Ward Morgan, he was born 6 years after the disappearance, and then the statement about, well, every time a ship came, he went and hid, and mom brought him food or whatever. It seemed like this goes together more so than any other story. That's why I wanted to follow this one, and others have said, this is true, this is from William Morgan. But did you notice the family has a different story about why he left the United States? They didn't really know his background, and maybe never did.
Well, do you think that there was some financial incentive for Morgan's widow or his Batavia wife being paid because, I believe it was Seaver, wanted to publish the secrets?
Right.
And gee, if he's dead, that's gonna be hype for the book.
Right.
And it also supported Thurlow Weed as a newspaper publisher, and a politician who was against DeWitt Clinton.
Yes.
This all played in, come on, somebody got paid.
Yes, it was on and on and on, and then the whole 20-year recycling, and it's so frustrating that the Pembroke skeleton isn't available. And
Yeah, but I mean, they plowed over cemeteries even if he'd have been buried where you knew.
Yeah.
But a lot of old cemeteries date back to the 1700s. I mean, they are there.
And
So
Indians have been around here much longer than that, and people do die.
right.
And where do they go? They either lay on the ground or they get put under the ground. They have forever.
That's why
So
they-
it's nothing,
That's why they need forensic anthropologists to sort that out, because they could immediately have assessed that skeleton and said, basically ancestry or bioaffinity, et cetera, et cetera. We're not able to do it. Because it's not there. Yes.
So when you were talking about the coroner's inquest,
Yeah.
so the coroner qualifications at the time
Right.
were probably not were minimal.
Right.
at best.
He was literate,
Right?
and that would probably be the first thing, and maybe he had 5 years of schooling.
Right. And coroners are elected
Right.
to this day. What are the credentials of coroners today?
21 and a resident of the county.
There you go.
No education.
Some things don't hit. So coroners don't
Reason they don't
have
want
to
them to
be,
change.
coroners don't have to be medical doctors. So that's a medical examiner has to be a medical doctor.
Right.
Coroner does not need to be. And coroners can be self-trained. A lot of times they come as funeral directors or nurses or EMTs. And some are, board certified death investigators, but not all. So it's kind of a self-challenge thing. I used to teach at SUNY Oswego. In Oswego County, the DA was the coroner.
He went for it.
Is that a conflict of interest? Other questions? To us to be continued.
Well, thank you again, Anne, for that great presentation. For anybody who doesn't have the book and is interested, I do have some in the gift shop, if you'd like. Just a quick PSA, some upcoming things. We have our next trivia night a week from tonight to 13th. It will be on the First Ladies of the United States. Then next Friday is our annual Irish music St. Patrick's Day concert with Noel Arney. So you won't want to miss that. It's a 2-hour concert, so come and enjoy all the classic Irish tunes. Then our next guest speaker will be Wednesday, March 26th, Chris Makowski, who is a very well-known Civil War historian, author, battlefield guide, writer, you name it. We'll be talking about the last days of Stonewall Jackson. And then March 27th will be our next Java with Joe, and Tyler Angora, our curator, will be talking about our new exhibit that he created, a dressmaker's work, fashioning the 19th century, and sort of the research behind that in finding these women that were dressmakers, but also the fashion that they created. And that'll be at 9 a.m. that morning with free coffee and donuts from Tim Hortons. So,
Or cookies.
well, it'll be donuts, so. I'll tell you that much, it'll be donuts, but everything's on our website, on our Facebook page. If you get our email blasts, they are on there. If you don't, become a member, and then you'll get those email blasts, and you'll know everything going on. Or just call us and say, hey, what's happening, and we'll be sure to tell you. So, thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.